DC never announced it. There were no headlines, no big deaths. But over the years, some characters simply vanished, gone without explanation. They weren't killed in battle. They weren't retconned by crisis events. They were just gone, quietly dropped as if they never existed. And the strangest part, DC once introduced them with full confidence. Powers, origin stories, even team-ups with major heroes. But for reasons never revealed, they were abandoned. These are 10 DC Comics characters so forgotten, even DC pretends they never happened. At number 10 is Crag, a character DC buried so deep, even die-hard fans forgot he ever existed. He debuted in Justice League America, annual number 7, 1993, as part of the Bloodlines event, DC's bold but disastrous attempt to inject new blood into its superhero roster. Crag, a Canadian immigrant who could turn his body into living stone, was supposed to be DC's answer to the tough, grounded anti-hero wave. But his rocky design felt generic, his backstory lacked depth, and fans just didn't care. There was no buzz, no demand, and no creative push. DC quickly realized Crag wasn't landing. His concept was too bland in a market already saturated with tough guys. So they quietly removed him. No death, no retcon, just silence. He was never mentioned again. He wasn't killed or retconned, just abandoned mid-sentence, like a character DC gave up writing halfway through. At number 9 is Terrorsmith, a character whose powers were as haunting as his fate. Jack Mobley was a struggling computer programmer battling personal failures and a terminal cancer diagnosis. His life changed when the Bloodlines parasite attacked him, awakening a latent metagene. But this wasn't a gift, it was a curse. Mobley became Terrorsmith, a living nightmare who could transform others into monstrous versions of their deepest fears. Yet Terrorsmith never fit into DC's bright, bold superhero universe. His grotesque abilities clashed with the tone of DC's stories, and writers didn't know where to place him. No arcs were planned, no teams wanted him. Though he briefly appeared in the Bloodbath finale, he was ultimately abandoned. There was no grand finale, no retcon, just quiet erasure. Terrorsmith vanished, a disturbing anomaly DC seemingly preferred to forget. At number 8 is Myriad, a character built on fractured identities, yet denied the chance to ever form one of her own. She debuted in Superman Volume 2, annual number 5, 1993, during the Bloodlines event, as a former CIA agent whose mind split into 64 distinct personalities after being infected by an alien parasite. Each persona had unique skills, and she could even absorb the minds of others, a power that was ripe for psychological depth and espionage-driven stories. But that was exactly the problem. Myriad's concept was too complex for DC's mainstream superhero line. Her fragmented identity didn't fit the clean-cut mold, and her powers were too cerebral, too niche, and too hard to define for casual readers. She lacked a marketable hook, and DC editorial lost confidence quickly. So they dropped her quietly. She appeared once more in Bloodbath, then vanished. No resurrection, no retcon, and just like that, one of DC's most complex ideas was dropped for being too difficult to sell. Thought those were bad? The next 3 weren't even finished before DC gave up. One had no story, one chased trends, and one was straight up embarrassing. At number 7 is Slingshot, real name Deborah Pratchett, who debuted in Justice League America annual number 7, 1993, during DC's Bloodlines event. She was an African-American teenager with the ability to accelerate any object she touched, a unique power in the DC universe. Despite this, Slingshot never received a solo arc, backstory, or major character development beyond her introduction. She wasn't explored in terms of personality, motivations, or relationships with other characters. Like many Bloodlines characters, she faded from DC Comics after the event, with no follow-up appearances, no closure, and no official storyline explaining her absence. She wasn't killed, retconned, or formally removed, simply not used again in published material. Her last known appearance remains her debut, and she quietly disappeared from DC continuity. This lack of follow-up leaves Slingshot as a character with no defined path or conclusion, remaining confined to a single appearance with no exploration or expansion of her potential. At number 6 is Razor Sharp, aka Natalie Lewis. She was introduced in Robin Volume 2, Annual number 2, 1993, as a teenage hacker who could transform her limbs into razor-sharp weapons. She led the Cyber Rats, a group that screamed 90s cyberpunk but lacked narrative grounding. Her design was edgy, her powers visually striking, but beyond the surface, there was no substance, and that's exactly why she was removed. Razor Sharp was a product of trend chasing, DC's attempt to tap into hacker culture and gritty youth rebellion. But once the Bloodlines event fizzled out and the cyberpunk wave cooled, so did editorial interest in her. She was never given a solo arc, never developed beyond the cool hacker girl trope. In Infinite Crisis, DC used her as cannon fodder, killed by Superboy Prime with no build-up, signaling the final verdict, a character concept they no longer respected or wanted to salvage. At number 5 is Jam, a character so awkwardly out of place, even DC seemed embarrassed to keep him around. Michael Jam Jambowski was a walking stereotype, a surfer bro from the 20th century with vague energy powers and dialogue ripped straight from a bad Saturday morning cartoon. He debuted in Legion of Superheroes Annual number 4, 1993, as part of the Bloodlines wave. But instead of adding freshness to the Legion, he brought cringe. His powers were never defined. His personality was all slang, no substance, and fans hated it. The reason for his removal was simple. He was a tone-deaf attempt to appeal to 90s youth culture, and it backfired hard. DC realized they couldn't take him seriously. Neither could the audience, and no writer wanted to touch him after that. So they let him vanish. No explanation, no closure. Jam was just forgotten. At number 4 is Lauria, a character made of living metal. She debuted in Showcase 94 number 12 as an operative of the secretive Quorum with the ability to morph into organic metal and grow in size. Her powers gave her immense physical strength and a visually striking presence, and she was later included in the Blood Pack limited series alongside other characters introduced during the Bloodlines event. Despite her abilities, Lauria did not receive significant development beyond her initial appearances. She had no detailed backstory, major solo arcs, or emotional depth explored in the comics. In Blood Pack number 4, 1995, Lauria was killed off in a storyline that did not revisit her character afterward. There is no official explanation from DC Comics regarding her limited use or the reasons for her character's removal from continuity. After her death in Blood Pack, Lauria did not appear in major DC publications again. If you thought bad characters just get ignored, not these. The next 3 blew up so hard, DC pretended they never happened. At number 3 is Loose Cannon, a character whose emotional rage and shifting colors became his curse rather than his strength. Eddie Walker, once an LA cop, became DC's attempt at a Hulk-like hero in Action Comics Annual number 5, 1993. His unique twist, skin that changed color with his emotions, making him literally a mood ring powerhouse. DC hoped this gimmick would resonate, but readers saw him as little more than a goofy parody. Too silly to take seriously, too superficial to care about. The miniseries flopped badly. Readers didn't connect, writers didn't invest, and DC lost confidence. Editorials saw him as a failed experiment, an embarrassment rather than a hero. His quiet removal was brutally symbolic. A final appearance in JSA Classified, severely wounded with his heart literally ripped out. DC didn't retcon him or rewrite him, they simply abandoned him. Loose Cannon wasn't removed because he lacked power, he was removed because he lacked credibility. At number 2 is Cardinal Sin, a character forged from faith, guilt, and tragedy. Perry Dennison was once a Catholic priest searching for light in Gotham's chaos. But after being infected by a Bloodlines parasite, that light curdled into something twisted. He gained a deadly death touch and donned a black market escape suit adorned with religious iconography, transforming himself into Cardinal Sin, a vigilante fueled by rage and spiritual torment. But DC backed away almost immediately. The reason? His concept, a violent, disillusioned priest using religion as a weapon, was simply too controversial for the mainstream. It clashed hard with Batman's grounded world and made editors uncomfortable. Fans didn't latch on, and writers had no desire to explore a hero whose powers and premise risked backlash. So DC shelved him. Just one appearance, then silence. DC saw no future in a character built on symbolism that might backfire. At number 1 is Edge, a character carved from grit, but left to rust in silence. He debuted in Superman, the Man of Steel, Annual Number 2, 1993, as a street-level vigilante, a blue-collar man from Metropolis who hurled razor-sharp blades fighting crime with fury instead of flash. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't noble. He was angry, brutal, and painfully human. But that was exactly the problem. DC built its universe on hope, color, and larger-than-life icons. Edge, with his bleak tone and grounded violence, felt more like a character from a crime drama than a superhero comic. His story lacked scale. His concept lacked appeal. And in a lineup filled with aliens, gods, and legends, a bitter man with blades just didn't fit. So, DC quietly shelved him. No team invites, no reboot, no explanation. Edge was removed not for failure, but because DC saw no room for his hero in their world. These weren't just forgotten characters, they were experiments DC abandoned. Which one shocked you most? Hit share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories DC hopes you never uncover.